Muted.
I was saying how excited I am to talk today about third-party ownership modeling in SAM, a new feature in the latest version of the tool. So this is one of the closing in on one of the last webinars of this year. We've had a number of webinars in this time slot periodically over the last fiscal year. And we've got all of those are available on the SAM website. You can see the link down here at the bottom. I encourage people who are new to SAM to view several of these, and most importantly, probably the introduction to new SAM from last November. This model that we're going to talk about today, third-party financial model, was just released in the new version in June. And so you will need to download the latest version of SAM to get this to work for you. And let's keep moving forward. So we're going to talk about several things today. First is the background on financial models in SAM, and not we could spend 2 days talking about the details of all the financial models in SAM, but here we're just want to focus on some highlights that are relevant to how the third-party ownership model differs from those. Overview of the third-party ownership model, a quick demonstration, and then I'm hoping we have a significant amount of time at the end for questions from the audience, as this feature is a little bit different, and making sure we clarify how best to use it and what it's useful for. Again, I think we're going to assume that people watching this webinar are somewhat familiar with distributed PV modeling in SAM, and again, familiar with existing residential financial modeling in SAM as well, and then that they have an interest in third-party ownership financial models. So going back to previous financial models, we have two financial models primarily focused on distributed technology. So that could be distributed PV or distributed wind and so forth. The residential model and the commercial model. And in both of those existing models, the outputs and the focus is on the owner of the system, and the owner is either the commercial building owner or the residential building owner. So the homeowner or the guy who owns the warehouse down the street who's putting PV on. So all the analysis is done assuming that that person either buys the system or takes out a loan for the system, or it's wrapped into their mortgage. And so all the calculations are done from the perspective of that entity. So incentives, tax credits, other incentives, tax rates, depreciation, etc. Does a homeowner get to claim accelerated depreciation or any depreciation at all on the system? Are those incentives available for a homeowner or a commercial building owner, or are they, incentives only available for businesses or for individual homeowners? So there's a lot of those kind of questions, and they're all addressed within SAM from the perspective of the person owning the system, and we're assuming that the person owning the system is the building owner. And so then the outputs, as a consequence, the net present value, the levelized cost of energy, etc., are from the perspective of the building owner. So in the end, if you have a positive NPV for a residential system, that's from the perspective of the homeowner. So is the homeowner making money on this system? Is the commercial building owner making money on this system? To date, we have had no real capability of assessing whether or not someone other than the building owner were making money on that system or not. And then the third-party ownership model in SAM departs from this approach significantly. So moving to the next slide. The key point is that we are now not thinking about the owner. So as this first bullet says, the third-party owner, be it one of the major PV companies, or be it a community solar perspective or some other perspective, we do not then take the perspective of, say, let's call it Solar City or Sunrun or one of these third-party owner companies, we don't know what the net present value will be within that third-party owner company or within the portfolio of all the projects that they own. So we are still taking into account the perspective of the residential building owner or the commercial building owner, but again, they are no longer, or sorry, the building owner, but who is now not the system owner. And so hopefully I'm explaining this clearly, but we're still taking the perspective of the residential building owner and the commercial building owner, but not the system owner. So in the past, we've always addressed it from the perspective of the person who owned the system. We are not doing that now. So going forward on other key points related to third-party ownership, so we have set it up so that the user can enter either a lease payment or a PPA payment. So you have, in perspective, gotten a bid or signed a contract with a third-party owner, and you can enter that price that you have agreed to with them into SAM and then do analysis from there. The system, the PV system, reduces the customer's electricity bill, and the customer then makes payments to the third-party owner for the system, and that's in a lease in both cases. And in a power purchase agreement specifically, the customer pays for the power generated by the system at a fixed rate called a PPA price, fixed for that year. It can go up in subsequent years. In a lease agreement, the customer makes monthly lease payments on the system independent of how much power the system actually produces, how much gets offset. So the lease payment is set based on anticipated production, but actual monthly and annual production can deviate from that anticipated production. The lease payment, therefore, is more immune to interannual variability or months that are particularly sunny or particularly cloudy and depart from the average, anticipated average. I think the other key thing from a SAM perspective is that many of the typical SAM input pages go away because we are now assuming all of that is handled or addressed by the third-party owner, and we are independent of thinking about how they're getting incentives, how they're dealing with depreciation. The vast majority of financial inputs that one would normally think about when you're thinking about it from the owner of the PV system's perspective, all of that goes away because we don't have any of that information. So one may wonder, why did we implement the third-party ownership model in this way as opposed to our more standard way of addressing things from the perspective of the PV owner? Why have we added potentially this confusion for the SAM user? So I think the first point, why did we add it in the first place? There's been significant growth in third-party ownership PV systems, and that raises many analysis questions, which we hope can be answered by SAM. So third-party ownership at the moment is, I think, roughly 40% of the new installations in the PV market, and that number obviously is changing and varies depending on where you are in the country. But with such a significant fraction of the marketplace being addressed by third-party owners, we felt that there was a number of things that could be investigated. And secondly, we realized we would not be able to get accurate cost and financing assumptions from within third-party ownership companies. So as you know, in SAM defaults, we have the single owner model, the residential model, the commercial model, and we have a number of defaults both for cost and performance, but as well as financing. We don't want to say something specific or make defaults about third-party ownership companies. We don't know how they're working on the inside, and those would be difficult analysis questions to address. Then the last reason that we've done this is we have had requests from users, both external users in the SAM community and also internal requests from within NREL and other parts of the national lab that are doing analysis in regards to third-party ownership. to be able to do several different activities. And I've listed them here. The first being to investigate the value of different electricity rate structures and load profiles under a third-party ownership agreement. So one prime example of this is, geez, I've made this agreement with a third-party ownership company based on my load profile at the time. 3 years into the system, our load profile changes. Maybe we change the infrastructure of our home, put in a different kind of air conditioner unit, or our children go off to college, or we've plugged in an electric vehicle. So as loads change during the lifetime of the PV system, how does that impact kind of the financial makeup of the third-party ownership system? Second one would be investigating the sensitivity of the net present value to variations in inflation, discount rate, net metering changes, etc. So how sensitive is the fact that I'm making money over the lifetime of the system? How sensitive is that to these factors, which can change during the lifetime of the system? So, say you've installed your system in 2009 or 2010 when the economy was in recession and inflation rates were very low. What does that look like? So I think just understanding the sensitivity of the financial package to these factors is of interest. And then lastly, comparing third-party ownership to the residential or commercial model to compare owning it directly versus having a third party own it. And the financial picture as represented in SAM is only part of that. Obviously, having a third party own your system has advantage in terms of, or has value potentially in terms of reduced O&M costs or reduced O&M uncertainty to the homeowner, and you've got another player involved to handle installation and handle cash flow issues with tax and credits and so forth. But from a SAM perspective, there's interest in comparing third-party ownership to direct ownership. Next slide. So as you can see, the number of inputs related to third-party ownership is not that significant. There are just a few inputs, and we'll go through them now. For a lease agreement where the customer makes fixed monthly lease payments for the system, you have the first year monthly lease price, and again, this is separated from the actual production during that month. And then the lease price escalation rate, and that's typically part of the package that you have from the third-party owner. So you have a monthly payment, and then how much that will increase, usually in a percentage per year. That's how we've represented it. The other option is to enter a PPA price, or power purchase agreement price. And again, it's the same sort of construct where you have a first-year PPA price. Again, that's dollars per kilowatt hour typically, as opposed to dollars per month for a lease payment. And then secondly, a price escalation rate for subsequent years. So we anticipate that for most of the contracts that we looked at, and we reviewed a number of different contracts in the process of developing this capability from a number of different third-party owners, this construct captures the bulk of those structures, at least as they are in the marketplace now. In the future, we may add additional complexity here, but for this release, this is what we have decided to do. And then looking at the second box of inputs related to third-party ownership on the financial page of the inputs, there are a number of analysis parameters. So for those of you familiar with our more complex financial models, this is a significantly reduced set of inputs, and it reflects the fact that the vast bulk of the financial related inputs that we normally have go to now the third-party owner, who, again, we are not representing within SAM. So the first is the agreement period. The number of years in the lease agreement or PPA. Note that your system might last longer than the agreement period, and by default we've set this at 25 years. You may get free power after that, or you may have a clause in which you renegotiate with the third-party owner at that point at the end of the agreement period. Inflation rate, again, we've set that at the typical SAM default of 2.5% per year, but this might be something that you may want to play with. I think, if you anticipate as a user or an analyst that inflation will increase over the next 20 years, that would be something that you may want to investigate. The real discount rate, again, that's the measure of the time value of money, and that's also something that people may want to vary to understand the sensitivity to the results due to the discount rate. The nominal discount rate is then calculated from the real discount rate, and both of those, either of those can be used in your analysis. Next slide. Slide 10. Key outputs. You'll note that the metrics table for the third-party ownership option is reduced from what we typically would provide. And again, this is a reflection of this construct where we are representing the residential commercial building owner and not the system owner. So the net present value to the system owner here, $3,426. And then we do continue to provide more value or more outputs based on the performance of the actual PV system. The annual results appear in the data table, annual cost. So that sums up the annual cost of the agreement based on the production for each year. And really captures the escalation rate for either the lease payment or for the PPA payment. The energy value in each year is also presented in the typical data tables. And then we have some default graphs, as you can see on the right, that represent the cash flow throughout the year. I would add that I think that the key value is really the net present value for the lifetime of the system, to say, yes, this system as a whole is saving me money, and that's of interest, I think, to homeowners and to analysts. I think that also then the actual cash flow, in the out years, many people, at least anecdotally, are purchasing systems because they anticipate that electricity bills will continue to go up and that they will continue to save money over the lifetime. Save more money in nominal dollars in the future. Okay, let's now take a break from the PowerPoint slides and do a quick demonstration. I put in some default assumptions here. The prepaid price is 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour with an escalation rate of 3% per year, which is high, potentially. And the system would be here in Lakewood, Colorado, a 10 kilowatt PV system with SunPower modules using Xcel Energy residential rates. So let's take an opportunity to set that up. So we'll start a new project in SAM. We'll do a detailed PV analysis, third-party ownership. We will select, already created a Lakewood, Colorado weather file using the gridded data option down here to download a file from the Solar Prospector. So we will select that. We've already selected SunPower modules, inverters. We'll specify a desired array at 10 kilowatts We'll assume default values for shading, snow, losses, and degradation. We'll assume no battery at this time, but that would be something with our new battery modeling capability that might also be of interest in a third-party owned system, as some third-party owner systems are now offering batteries as an option with their PV systems. We get to the lease agreement. So we have a power purchase agreement, and instead of 10 cents, it's 9.5 cents with a 3% escalation per year. We'll assume that the agreement period, the discount rate, and the inflation rate are adequate. We will do a search for rates and search by zip code, Public Service of Colorado, also known as Xcel Energy. We'll assume a residential R rate and apply the OpenAI rate. This is not a very exciting rate. It's a flat two-tier rate, one tier during the summer and another tier during the rest of the period. And then we will simulate. And you can see with these default values for this system, the net present value for this system is negative. And just to explore the sensitivity, so you can see here these list of metrics are here with the net present value being the one I pointed out, but we also have all of the several performance values for the PV system. We have a default graph of the monthly energy production, losses, agreement cost, and energy production versus electric load. And again, this is a very default system. This is not meant to indicate that third-party owner systems in any case are positive or negative in terms of value. And so we can set up a situation where we can look at that change. So if we go back to financial parameters and we say instead of 9.5 cents, we're going to only be paying 6 cents for the power, or and we can run that. Now we're getting much closer to a break-even system. If we then say, okay, we'll do 9.5 cents again, but have no escalation rate on that PPA price. Simulate again. Still negative, but less so. And then if we combine those two changes and we go with 6 cents PPA price and 0, we get to a positive value. So we anticipate that analysts perhaps would not do this by hand, but through SAM scripting, you could look at a variety of changes and value recommendations. Another one that might be of interest is evaluating the electricity cost. Note that here we have the default value of electricity cost escalation rate at 0. If we change that to something along the lines of 2 or perhaps 3% and simulate that, we get suddenly our net present value is going up significantly. And so that's another one. If we then double it to say 6% and simulate that, you're suddenly making a more significant amount of money off of your third-party owned system. So those are a number of the different levers that the user can apply and investigate in their analysis to understand sort of the change in the net present value or the change in the overall value of a PV system with respect to the uncertainty in all of these values. Obviously, there's uncertainty in the inflation rate, the electricity escalation rate, the load, and so forth. And so these are all the areas that we think would be of interest to analysts as well as potentially commercial building owners and installers that are trying to investigate this space with their potential customers. If we go back then to the slide deck and go to the conclusion slide. So we've added, the conclusions are basically that we've added a capability in SAM to investigate the implications of third-party owned systems from the perspective of the building owners. But again, not with respect, in this case, of the system owner. So the third-party entity owns the system, but again, we are looking at analysis questions from the perspective of the building owner. We aren't saying anything about financing within a third-party owned company. So unlike a lot of the independent power producer analysis done with SAM, in this case, we are not trying to evaluate whether the project will be cost-effective to go forward, say the IRR is positive by some percentage, or that we're not saying here's the PPA price that a third-party owner needs to offer to the building owner to make it work for them, because we do not have all of that data, and each of those companies operates uniquely and has different internal cost structures than what is typical or average in the marketplace. So I think that's the key takeaway. And then lastly, I would say that this capability, and again, the simple levelized cost of energy capability based on a fixed charge rate, are two significant additions on the finance modeling part of SAM that have been added recently in the release this summer. And we encourage you to play with this, provide us feedback, and both for this model and for the simple LCOE model. You know, those are two new financial models in SAM, and we would encourage everyone to try them out and give us feedback on what's useful for them or what could be added that would make it more useful for you as a SAM user. So I think at this point, we're open to entertaining any questions available or that people would like to ask. And I am not seeing the chat box at the moment. So.
Yeah, Nate, we have a couple questions. There's two here from Dustin Merkley. The first one is a question about kilowatt rollover versus dollar rollover. And I don't know if it's, maybe he just wants an explanation of the difference.
Kilowatt rollover versus dollar rollover. Who's the best person to take that question?
I can answer that.
Okay. Yep.
If you could bring up SAM and go to the
sure
utility rate page, please. So those are options under net metering, and as you know, there are many different approaches to net metering depending on the state you're in and then on what utility territory you're in. So we've are attempting to model sort of the widest range of net metering rules and rate structures. So these two net metering options, rollover monthly excess energy means that any excess kilowatts produced by the system over the electricity requirement of the building gets rolled over to the next month and effectively reduces your monthly consumption. And then the rollover monthly excess dollars means that you calculate the monthly bill, and you roll over the dollar savings to the next month. So you're reducing the monthly bill rather than your monthly consumption with the net metering credits. And then the follow-up question there is, can you please explain the difference in modeling this for tiered versus TOU billing rates? And maybe Dustin, could you clarify? I'll unmute your line so you can follow up by voice. Go ahead, Dustin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so my question is in San Diego SDG&E's territory, we have for residential and commercial, but I'll talk about residential because I think it'll be a little easier than the multiple commercial rates we have. In residential, we have the option of a tiered billing structure instead of this two-tier that you guys are showing. We have a four-tiered, which is just a true kilowatt over rollover. We also have the ability of a time of use for solar and also for electric vehicles, where we're able to capture a higher daytime value of energy, specifically during the summer in the peak production hours. And then when you pull your credits back off the grid, we're pulling them back at the lower off-peak hours. I was curious if this net metering model allows us to show those different rates of offsetting, peak hours versus when you pull back your credits in times when the solar is not working.
Right. So I think the first thing is just to clarify terminology here. I heard you use the word rollover in maybe a different sense than we're using it here. So the rollover under net metering here refers to what happens to excess credits at the end of the month, and how are they rolled over into the following month. But Nate, if you could scroll down to the energy charges section there, I think you used the term rollover in the context of tiers. So you can have up to, as you can see, you can specify 12 different periods. So those would be time of use periods. And then, yeah, Nate, if you could just stay there where the energy, yeah, right there's good. And then for each period, you've got up to 6 tiers. And the example that Nate gave just has 2 periods that are defined in the matrix up there. So you've got period 1, which is the winter months, and period 2, which is the summer months. And then period 2, in the summer months, there's a tiered rate structure. In the winter months, there's just a single rate. So is that what you were asking?
That does help. Yes, because for us, I do a lot of analysis on time of use, and then for people in San Diego, we specifically have an advantage of solar with electric vehicles. Do we have the ability to input their consumption by hour, essentially, to show how that will model against the production?
Right. So Nate, if you could switch over to the load page, yeah. You can provide and click edit data. You can provide SAM with an hourly or sub-hourly, for that matter, load profile.
Perfect.
So you'd have to generate that outside of SAM, and figure out some way to model include the effect of the electric vehicle in there.
Yeah, I have all that in the Excel file. So yeah, that is actually perfect. That gives me everything that I need to see if I can model it. Thank you.
Yeah, and as you're working with this, if you've got more questions, you can use the support form to ask us questions, or email support. We're happy to help you.
Great, thank you so much.
Yep. So I will mute Dustin, and Michael Draper has a question for Nate. Instead of repeating the input process, why not use parametric or stochastic analysis to explore a range of input values and test sensitivity of baseline financial data?
And I think that's a valid question, and I think I was attempting to just explore the space for the demonstration, but for more robust analysis or looking at a variety of sites, you would want to use scripting, parametric analysis, or stochastic analysis as well.
And if you could switch to the financial parameters page, please.
Sure.
I just want to point out that there is a small bug with the current version, which is that the 4 input variables under terms of agreement there, the PPA price and escalation and the lease price and escalation, unfortunately, in setting up the model, we forgot to make those variables available as parametric variables. So we'll fix that for the next version. But if you're working with this model and would like to do parametric or stochastic studies on those inputs, please contact me again through the support form or by email, and we've got a workaround fix that we can make those variables available on your copy of SAM. So if you want to do parametric studies on these variables, please let me know. So we've got a question on battery storage. So we do have another webinar coming up in a couple weeks on battery storage, and we actually have a recording of one on the website that we did as an introduction during the beta testing phase of the model. So if you look at the videos page on the SAM website, you can find that video, but I'm sure we can.
Nick's here, and he could probably provide at least a quick answer to that.
For sure.
While people go on their way to the webinars.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the question is, can you use battery storage to model peak demand shaving? And right now, the dispatch controller for the battery is not really set up to do that well. So you can try to determine when the peaks throughout the months and years will be and schedule the battery to dispatch to reduce those peaks. But right now in SAM, there's not an automated controller. So we hope to be adding that in the next few months. And we do understand that there is a lot of interest out there to do that.
So it's the controller right now is a little more manual, and there would be a lot of handwork to try to figure out when those peaks will be.
That's right.
But you could start to get at that question, but we anticipate having a better controller in the near future.
That's right.
Yep. Okay.
Hugh, I see your request there. I'll post the workaround solution for the parametric issue on the support forum and send you a link to that. That will be on the support forum later this afternoon.
So while we wait to see if there's other questions, I would add that NREL has done a number of investigations of third-party ownership, and less on the SAM website, but if you look around on the NREL website or the NREL publications database and look up third-party ownership, we've already published a number of documents both helping understand the marketplace, the financing, and the value to the end consumer on the distributed side. So there are a number. I didn't want to imply that we haven't done any analysis yet, just because it hasn't been a factor in SAM. But NREL has an ongoing number of efforts on third-party ownership.
Nate, there's a couple questions here that I'll take the last one first. It's from David Wolf. It says, slightly off topic, but is there a way to model a lease pass-through or inverted lease structure?
I think the answer to that is no at this point. We have had people express some interest in inverted leases, and we have not yet been funded to add that to SAM. So we do have several other more complex structures, and people have tried to work with those to get to structures that aren't perfectly represented at this point, but I would say we do not have those structures fleshed out in there right now. We have continued to work with clients to try and get funding to add some additional financial structures, but to date those have not been funded activities.
And then there's a question that perhaps not everyone can see. That it says from Thomas Shelton, can you set up a PV panel that is not listed? And we can quickly show you how to do that. The answer is yes. Just go to the module page. This is the default module model, but there are several other options. And the CEC performance model with module database is the one where you pick a module from the list. But if a module is not in that list, then go to the option with user entered specifications, and there you just enter data from the manufacturer data sheet, and then SAM will calculate the parameters that it needs to run the simulations from that data. So that's how you can run the model for a module that's not in one of the databases.
Yep, and that process calculates all of the coefficients that are then needed by the CEC performance model, also known as the SOTO model, also known as the 5-parameter model. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask at this time?
I'm not seeing any more in the chat window.
I'm not either. We have no questions in the room either. So perhaps this is a good point to finish the webinar, Paul.
Sure.
So this is Nate Blair again, and we thank everybody for participating. This webinar will be available for viewing subsequent to this on the SAM website, along with the other webinars that we've had. And again, if you have other questions about third-party ownership or how it's handled in SAM, feel free to address those through the SAM support forum. And as Paul said earlier, we will put up the workaround to do parametric analysis shortly. We hope everyone has a sunny afternoon. Thank you very much.